Delighted that we are now joined by Dr Bjorn Lomborg. He's an academic. He's also author of numerous utterly brilliant books. But the latest, False Alarm, How Climate Change Panic Costs Us Trillions, Hurts the Poor and Fails to Fix the Planet. Actually, many more since then. Actually, I'm like, it's not the latest. So many. We've had you in to talk about your books many times, and always get a great reception from our audience because, you know, people talking sensible things, facts, you know, calling out the madness. Largely goes
like
down.
That.
Who knew?
Yes.
Who knew, Bjorn? It will definitely catch on at some point with our politicians. Look, we've had the election of Donald Trump back to a second term in office. Now, he was called a climate denier. You know, we know that the Democrats, Biden and Kamala Harris, fully signed up to net zero and pushing that agenda, whilst also making sure that America became the biggest producer of oil and gas in the world, which I find rather strange. What do you think that a Trump presidency means for the net zero project?
It's basically the death of it. You know, look, fundamentally, Trump is probably too skeptical about climate change because it is a real problem. But the real big issue, both here in Britain and Europe and the US, is that our current approach is basically, let's say, spend as much money as we possibly can to live up to these silly promises. That's just never going to work with an electorate. Right now, electricity bills in the UK are 3 times per kilowatt hour what they were in 2000 when you correct for inflation. Most of that is because of climate policy.
That's subsidies, but also the policies that have meant that we don't have fossil fuels and nuclear energy,
you don't
which is
have
producing.
backup, so you need to pay a lot of people for having batteries to stand by, a lot of other things. There's all these costs, and you know we keep being gaslighted and tell us, oh, this is cheaper. You know, solar.
I'm amazed whenever I'm on social media. People say, no, you know, oh, Julia, you don't understand.
Come on.
But clean energy is not just cleaner; it's cheaper.
It's cheaper, and look, they're technically correct some places. When the sun is shining, solar panels can
Let's look out the window.
Cheaper.
How's it going today?
Not today, and not today. I mean, Europe actually has what's called Dunkelflaute, a German term when it's both dark and there's no wind. And that's why, of course, it's incredibly expensive. So the point is, when the sun is shining, when the wind is blowing, it's possibly cheaper. But surprise, most people don't just want their electricity when the sun is shining and the wind's blowing.
In fact, that's almost when they most need and want it.
Exactly. And so we need to pay out of our noses to get to get that power available when the sun is not shining and the wind's not blowing. And that's why when you just look at the facts, you have a situation where if countries have virtually no solar and wind, they have a cost of, say, about 10 cents, so about 10p for a kilowatt hour for industry and households on average. If you have lots of solar and wind, you pay 20, 25 cents. And it's not rocket
It's very
science.
simple. Not only can people then not afford their own domestic energy bills, and we saw this with the crisis with the energy bills going up in the UK and across the world. It's been a major factor in the American election, even now, over the cost for industry, because, you know, people just simply shut up shop. We're seeing this in Germany right now. The German economy is the powerhouse of Europe, and it is collapsing because they simply cannot afford to keep the lights on in the factories.
Of course, if you are a producer and you have to pay 2 or 3 times the amount of cost for energy, and that's a main part of your cost, of course you move somewhere else. This is not rocket science.
It takes jobs.
We can't move somewhere else, so we are forced to have to pay for this, but then eventually we elect other leaders. And you know, Trump was elected for a lot of other reasons, but one of the reasons is that people are not willing to pay more and more for their energy.
And again, it may not be specifically an objection to net zero policies, but it's the impact of those on people's everyday lives in terms of being able to put gas in the car and the like. So in terms of policies we're expecting from Donald Trump now, we've got, we've still got the Paris Climate Agreement. I mean, he pulled out of it. Biden went back into it. He's likely to pull out of it again. Let's say, he's beholden to, the big oil, big whatever. You know what? Big oil funds everything, guys. They pay a lot of tax.
They pay a lot of tax. They don't fund everything. But
they also involved in pretty much everything that we make and everything that's delivered to us and everything that we buy. So again, it's all very easy for the Guardianistas to get to say, oh, these terrible companies. Well, the world ends. We go back to the Stone Age tomorrow without the oil companies, don't we?
Well, we go back to the Stone Age if we didn't have energy. And most energy in the world comes from fossil fossil fuels. That's true in Britain as well.
And it's true for many, many decades to come.
Yes, I just did a fun statistic for Germany. In 2010, they voted the first big climate the Energiewende, and they promised that they were going to show the way for the world on how to do green energy. They got 79.6% of their energy from fossil fuels. Last year, from the International Energy Agency, you know how much they got? 79.6%, the same number.
Well done.
Now, admittedly, what they had done is they had thrown out a lot of their energy use from industries that have moved elsewhere, so they got poorer, but that cuts their carbon emissions, and they have increased the cost of energy so much that people use less. So they use less, and that means they've cut their carbon emissions, but fundamentally they're still back at the same point. Why? Yeah. Because this is what powers most of our
it is utterly bewildering to me that people are still supporting this, but we know they are.
Well, and Julie, I think that's the point. Trump is just the first of many that once this gets sufficiently expensive, people are just going to boot out.
Well, we're seeing this across Europe, aren't we? This is very clear. I think there's a growing movement here in the UK, but we're certainly seeing across Europe numerous elections where it's not just the issue of the cost of living, it's not just the issue of border control, but net zero has been actually played a very, very key role. We've still got these COP summits, though, we've heard so much about. Each COP summit is going to save the world. We're on our 29th, so they're not doing the job that well. This latest one is in Baku, the capital of Azerbaijan, and starts in a few days' time, attended by representatives of almost everyone in the world, including the Biden administration, the US, and of course the UK as well, because we hosted one in Scotland a few years back, and again that didn't save the world either. But the latest current, the wheeze to save the world apparently is that we put up taxes on oil companies, on people flying, on shipping, so basically us being able to go on holiday, and of course the cost of actually transporting anything or making anything, to the tune of raising $1 trillion every single year, which will be given to poorer countries to help them tackle climate change. Do you think that'll work, Bjorn?
It won't. I mean, look, we've struggled. So back in 2009, Hillary Clinton promised that the Copenhagen summit, my home town, in order to get the poor countries on board with saying we want to do something about climate, because remember, most poor countries want to get rich. They want to lift their populations out of poverty. They want to get a lot more energy, not less energy. But they were sort of like, all right, if you pay us enough, maybe we'll say all nice words. And so Hillary promised $100 million. $100 billion back then.
I mean, you may as well. Just the numbers don't mean anything anymore. They don't.
That's a lot of money. And we struggle. And honestly, we kind of made it, but it's all made up money. It's not real money. Most of this, the Indians estimate it's about $20 billion a year. But, we sort of managed to do it. But now, of course, the poor countries are saying, well, if you want us to go further, we want a lot more money. India alone is saying they want $1 trillion, just $1 trillion for India until 2030. And of course, all these countries are saying we need a lot more money. Yeah. The funny thing is, we're being told solar and wind is cheaper, but we also got to give them $1 billion in order to afford to get this incredibly cheap energy. That's just, we're being gaslighted with this. And the real point again here is to realize we're not going to solve climate by just making incredibly expensive.
I don't think we're going to solve climate change. I think climate change is largely, if not all, natural, and it's something that we're going to have to adapt to. I don't think it's something that we're going to solve.
Well, so we definitely need to adapt to it, and there's a lot of very, very cheap.
Over
yes, there's a lot of very, very cheap ways to do this.
You've written whole books about it.
I actually believe that there is real climate change and it is man-made, but the fundamental point is you're only going to solve this, just like you solved all other problems, through technological innovation. If we can come up with green energy that's cheaper than fossil fuels, one thing could be fourth-generation nuclear. Imagine if we actually have these small modular nuclear reactors, and they're just much cheaper. We don't need a COP29 or anyone else. Everyone will just buy them. Yeah. So the simple point here is we should be investing a lot more into green energy research and development because that's cheap. That's, a tenth or a hundredth of what most green energy advocates want to spend. That we can afford.
Yeah, the trouble is there is now so much money in this. It's now, you know, a green sort of industrial energy complex. Yeah. There is so much money made. What's interesting also, this is a story, it's very much a UK-based story, but earlier this week, Ed Miliband, our Energy Security and Net Zero Secretary, as I've said to all of those secretaries with that job title, it's either or, energy security or net zero, is one or the other, guys. But Ed Miliband is a full-on devotee. I mean, he's zealot about this. He said earlier this week on the 5th of November, today we have received independent advice from the National Energy System Operator Limited, which is a sort of independent body, on our clean power mission for net zero targets. Their report provides conclusive proof that clean power by 2030 is not only achievable but desirable and can lead to cheaper electricity and a more secure energy system for Britain. Well, that will be all great. If you look into who this organisation is, it's a company which has only one active shareholder. You'll never guess who that is.
It's him?
It's Ed Miliband. So he's received independent advice from an organisation of which he is the only shareholder, and he claims, and the only person with significant control, and he claims that he's got that advice. This is the issue, isn't it? Everyone claims these things, but actually...
And of course, we were told back in 2020 it'll be cheaper for you. No, it's not. It's much, much more expensive. Energy cost is up twice by 2019 in the UK, and we just keep believing this. But I think the proof of the pudding is the kind of thing that you saw with Trump is going to have a lot of other places, because we promised to cut 55% by 2030. I don't know what the UK target is.
Who knows what it is this week.
But in 2040, we promised to go 90%. Somewhere between 55%, which you can sort of pay your way out of, and it's only going to be very expensive for poor families. But 90%? That's going to be unaffordable.
Oh, no, we are literally, no one's allowed to fly. You're not allowed to eat meat. You can't own a car or use a taxi. You're having to turn your energy off. You're sitting in the dark at that point.
Yeah. And freezing.
And this is what we're being. It is absolutely extraordinary.
And we're going to throw those politicians out. And so the reality here is, and this is the argument, I think, to a lot of the climate worriers, that you are on the wrong track. Even if you're very, very worried, you're going to lose on this argument. What you need to do is to say, let's do much smarter, much cheaper investment in green energy research and development.
I'm all for the energy being cleaner and the environment being cleaner, 100%. Bjorn Lomborg, it's always such a pleasure. Before I let you go, a quick word from Philip Ingram, listening to all of that.
Well, I'm sorry, when you get the likes of our energy and net zero secretary turning around and you're quoting his own company where it's coming out of there, that's misleading the public. He has to be removed from office. He cannot continue.
I mean, that and also he's an idiot.
Well, yes, but if you're going to remove all the idiots from government, there wouldn't be a government.
Genuinely, you know, I know more about this issue than he does, and he's in charge of it. That worries the hell out of me. But there we are. Bjorn Lomborg, it's such a pleasure. Your books are all fantastic. You're one again, author of The False Alarm. I just love the title of the book. How climate change panic costs us trillions, hurts the poor, and fails to fix the planet. That is literally what governments are doing right now. We'll see if Donald Trump improves things. Thank you for popping into the studio. Great to have you in.